Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Serving It Up. Jim Hayes, along with a full cast today. We have Kyle Gibson, who has to leave a little bit early as they have a day game, and he's got to get a nice soak. Lance Lynn with us, and, of course, the great Matt Holliday. And I want to jump right into it, guys, because I want to hear Kyle weigh in and then get your guys' thoughts as well. But one of the topics that came out in regard to Major League Baseball this week is that MLB has taken away the buffer from MLB umpires. They have announced that there's new criteria for how they judge Major League umpires, and the buffer that umpires used to get of 2 inches has been shrunk down to 3/4 of 1 inch. It's a different buffer. And Kyle, I know you got a soak. I want to get your thoughts on that. To me, the compelling part was apparently MLB didn't tell players, teams, so this kind of came out of nowhere.
I think they're probably trying to make sure that the strike zone is called, on the plate how it is in the book. I think that's something that's been, an effort over the last few years, trying to make sure creating offense and creating less subjectiveness in the strike zone. I'm okay with making the buffer zone whatever, as long as if it's on the plate, it's a strike. I just think, we were talking just before we started. I think there's a challenge system here that's possibly just put in play and give every player one challenge. And if you want to use it in the first, then you use it in the first. And if you want to use it in the ninth, you use it in the ninth. And I think that's where the game probably needs to go. I do think there's an interesting thing that MLB does try to do. I don't know how much, I can get fined by talking about MLB since I'm still active, but they changed.
No one listens anyways.
No one's watching.
They changed the baseballs in 2017, and they didn't really tell anybody. And I think there's instances where transparency and just saying like, hey, this is the plan, this is what we're trying to do, and then you just have less question marks and less like, man, why did this happen? Well, we knew it was going to happen. So, but it is what it is. I can't say that I've noticed it, so it's probably not that big of a deal.
Lance, the whole buffer thing makes me laugh. It's a 2-inch buffer around the entire plate. That gives the umpires a lot of leeway, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you're looking at so they've shrunk that. I think this all has a lot to do with them trying to push the automated strike zone on the umpires too. So I think you're looking at when it comes to players, it was like, well, they're gonna do it. We tell them, and we don't really care to talk to them. That's kind of their motto anyways. So whatever. But I think this is more of a force the umpires to, hey, be open to this automated strike zone, or we're gonna make your misses known now because we've given you the 2 inches. Now we're shrinking it. So now the bad ones are going to be even worse. So it's going to be more obvious that we need the automated strike zone. I think that's what it's pushing more than anything. I don't think it really has a whole lot to do with the players. I mean, the strike zone, you want the strike zone to be the strike zone. That's all you care about. As a hitter, hey, if it's on the plate, I can deal with it. If as a pitcher, if it's on the plate and you miss it, that just pisses you off. You love to get a little bit, but you understand, and you also know the umpires are going to give you some too, so that you go there. But if everybody knows the strike zone is what it is, that's the best thing for baseball.
Are you on board with that, Matt?
I think I'm in favor of the full automated strike zone. I think it's one of these things where we have the technology now. Why are we not using it? Like it'd be like, I usually talk when I talk to people about it, like in tennis, like they have the ability to have in and out calls, but for some reason we still want to have a guy, a 65-year-old sitting in a chair on the other side. He's going to call the line on the far side. Why? Because we've always done it that way. No, they've moved on. And so I think that I like if we start, I think tomorrow, if they announced every player got one challenge, that no one would say anything. And I obviously with Jackson, I watch very closely and how these umpires, like the pitching is so good now that if you give a guy that's throwing 100 a ball and a half off the plate, these guys, they have no chance. And so let's start with every player getting a challenge. We have all the data, we have the system in place. It works fast. It's actually entertaining when they put it up on the scoreboard. Like, let's go to the one challenge for every player. And then I think in the near future, we should just transition because like Lance said, the pitcher, like I'm okay. Like the bad breaking ball that backs up that's still in the box that the umpires usually call a ball. I'm okay with that being a strike. Just like if they miss and it's this far outside at 100 miles an hour, it should be a ball. And so the 2-inch buffer zones and these buffer zones, this buffer zones, that, like let's just go electronic where there's no emotion. We take the variable of, oh, this umpire calls a low strike zone. This umpire calls a high strike zone. This guy's pitcher friendly. This guy's hitter friendly. That shit, we have a system now. We don't need objectivity from a man when we can just use, like, I mean, this is 2025. Like I'm pretty passionate about this because I want what's fair for both. Like we have the system, let's use it. What are we waiting for?
Yeah, there's a good chance you pissed that man off a time before too, so that buffer zone might get a little bigger, a little smaller too. It's just weird how
Kyle still has to pitch with these old men watching, so you might have a different view. I would imagine too. You can't push for automated right now because you're going to be pitching.
Honestly, as long as it's not the automated that they were using in my live BPs and buildup, where the high strike is eliminated and the front hip sinker that, is like clearly I threw a sinker in my live BP that the whole ball was in the TrackMan box behind me, and it was a ball in the automated strike zone. That's not going to work. I don't think you can do automated strike zone and shrink the strike zone to make, to take away the high strike, because what they're worried about is the high curveball that dumps in. That's really that's high at the hitter when it crosses the low curveball that almost bounces before it hits the catcher. Like I don't think you can shrink the strike zone and make it automated. But I mean, I think if hitters and players alike are good with going automated, I don't think it's that big a deal. I think it'll be fine. But I do think the challenge system is pretty cool. Jim, we talked about NBA fouls, right? Referees call fouls differently, but you get a challenge, and if you don't think it's a foul, then you challenge. But I do agree with Matt. I mean, I think I tried to have. Maybe it was a good thing that Jackson didn't come out today, but I invited Jackson out to come say hello to you today. But you can tell that Matt is fired up. And once again, I can't make a comment about the umpires last night, but I'm guessing that Matt was watching his last at bat, and Jackson was not happy about the call. So my guess is Duran got a little off the plate, and Matt is fired up for his son. So I understand that.
At 100. Yeah, not fun.
At 100.
Well, that's what I like. I don't like if I know that the high breaking ball, where traditionally it's been a ball, but I know that it's a strike now, I can get after that. But the ones that they call that are outside are the ones as a hitter that are hard to adjust to. Like I can't cover 2 inches off the inside corner and 2 inches off the outside corner. But if he told me that, hey, that curveball that feels low, that's always felt low, is actually going to clip the bottom, then I can make that adjustment. But like I said, I'm just good for like everything is consistent. Like, okay, I know that high ball is going to be a strike. Like I'm with you. I don't want them to eliminate the top of the zone. But like that, I'm always like, you take the emotion out of it. So if it's a ball, if it's a strike and I felt like it was a ball, there's no objectivity. Like it's just what the machine says. Like there's no one to be mad at.
Yeah. And then what they did also was they made it like an oval. They didn't even make it a square. So you could throw a ball over the plate the same height as the one next to it, and it was a ball. And I'm talking to these guys down there in my buildup. I'm like, wait, that pitch is over the plate. Yeah, but, the edges are curved now. So, it's actually over the plate, but it's a ball. Like to me, that's where that's not okay. But
so my question for Matt, since like pitchers are always going to want bigger strike zone and this and that, if you were to say, all right, the corners are the corners now. We're good. So technically you're shrinking the zone, but you're not. You're making the zone what it is. So how would you do the height for the hitter? Each hitter is going to be different, right? So we got to figure out the proper way to measure them. What would you say that would be the best way to do that?
I mean, don't we have that? Don't they have that? I think it's part of the system that it's built in that it can measure it in real time, right?
But like each guy from their knee to their belly button or knee to their belt's going to be a little different. So like, would we have to? I would say the best way to do it properly, and you got to take away like the guy that crouches just because he's trying not to get the high strike called too. So it's like your batting stance is what it is, but you're going to stand up, you're going to get measured, and we're going to put something on the top of your kneecap and right at your belt, and that's the strike zone, because I think that would be the fairest way to do it. And then you have, hey, you're not going to get in or off. It's the corner, or the plate is the plate, and then this is your height, and then you do your strike zone or your stance however you want, but it's going off of, hey, you're 6'4", but from your knee to your belly button or belt line or whatever it is this, and that's what it is. If you crouch down, just be prepared that the high strike's still there. It's going off of how measured that is. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, again, I don't care where, like, even when I watch the box, you know, most of the time it looks pretty accurate. Even I don't know how, if they're adjusting it, you know, on the screen, but I don't care, like, as a hitter, like, if it's feels a little high or a little low, I just want the ball called on the plate. Like, as a hitter, like, I can adjust and you know, if the ball's up, you know, or whatever. But I'm with Kyle. Like, let's go to a challenge system first and make sure that there's nothing egregious about it. And then, you know, once we have a very, like, you know, we have measurements and we have a confidence that how we change it based on the height of the hitter and how tall he is, then we can go full. But I just think that there's too many counts that are swayed from 0-1, you know, to 1-0, and 1-1, you know, the 1-1 pitch goes from 1-1 to 1-2 instead of 2-1. There's just too many of those pitches to not have the challenge system. And that's all predicated on how good the pitching is. I think it's just really hard because the pitching nowadays is better than it's ever been, and they want more offense. But, you know, and I think it's hard on these umpires. There's so much movement and the ball's coming so fast that I just don't think they're, you know, again, I'm not.
65-year-old man can't keep up. So
well, you know, I mean, it's just, you know, like, they do a great job because it is a hard skill, but we have technology. It's 2025. I mean, we should use it. They're using it in the minor leagues. I mean, it's good enough to use in spring training, but we don't want to use it.
What ticks you off, Matt, when you were a player and there was a bad call against you, or when you see a bad call against your son? Which ticks you off more?
Well, at this point, it's you know, it's definitely my son. At this point, I don't have many calls going against me, but I've always been a little bit irritable towards bad calls, if you will.
I think there is, and Jim, I don't know if you're ready to move on or not, but I think there could be a little unintended consequence here. I think that there could be a situation where hitters have to move up in the box to catch that certain pitches a little bit farther forward instead of letting the ball get into the plate. So I don't know if that'll be a consequence or not, but it could be a little consequence for pitches on the edges. And if that's the case, I don't think that's a good thing for hitters. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe that hasn't been the case in the minor leagues. I do know in the minor leagues, the pitches on the edges that don't get called allow hitters to get into a lot of hitters counts, and it does increase offense and offensive numbers.
One question: do they tilt the strike zone, so that high curveball won't be? So, you know what I'm saying, you could tilt the front of the zone, the low curveball doesn't catch, and I mean,
I don't think they do.
A lot of stuff.
I don't think they do. I mean, I think it's just, it matters kind of like on the, you know, the 5-sided home plate, the pentagon, might you say, if it crosses that, you know, in that 3D zone, because I do think, I don't know. No, it's not 3D to the back. I think it's the very front edge, because when they show it in AAA, it was, did it clip this 2-dimensional box on the scoreboard or not?
So you're saying the technology really isn't there yet, right? Isn't that basically?
Well, there are times where the automated system has been off, and I can throw a bullpen today, and the TrackMan worked great yesterday, and it might not work today. Hawkeye is, I think, what they're trying to use. That's what tennis uses. It might be great today, and the next day there's a glitch. And I think that's where the challenge system probably is just the best system right now, to say, okay, until we know for sure that we're not going to have this thing go crazy on us during a game, let's just give them challenges and do that. I think it's fun for fans. I think it's, I don't know. I think it gives accountability on both sides, quite honestly. You won't have a hitter yelling about a strike call or a ball call, and you won't have an umpire yelling about it. But maybe that's what people also want to see, you know? Yeah. My dad loves when managers run on the field and argue about calls, and that doesn't happen.
Hey, so get rid of the everybody gets a challenge, and then figure out how to do the corners with no buffer zone, and then that best of all worlds, because then you can challenge if you think it's high or low. Boom.
Yep.
You don't have if it's on the plate and the height was there, you're good.
But there is a interpersonal human element to it. Like the old school guys love seeing the man. Maybe you just get one old guy. Holliday can pick an old guy, and when there's a bad call, they yell at the old guy, even though it's the automated system. Maybe that would work. Is there a Lance? Is there like an umpire that you knew either was going to call against you because he didn't like you, or a guy who liked you where you knew you were going to get the benefit of the doubt?
Well, I pissed a lot of people off, Jim. So I pretty much went out there thinking that everyone didn't like me. That was my motto. And then no, I mean, you had a few guys that you had to talk to differently. You knew that, like Joe West was number one person that pops into your mind. You have to talk to Joe differently than you talk to everybody else. And I knew that. I was taught that by Matt and Carp and Wayno at a young age. And he one time, I remember there was a game. Brian Braun didn't talk to Joe very well, and we all knew that. And he gave Joe a dirty look one time in the first at bat on a ball that was probably just off. And I feel like Joe was testing him too. I really do. And Braun gave him a look, and then I could just feel him moving Yachty further off the plate, and I squared Yachty up again, and it was like Joe was looking right in Bronny's eyes when he was calling a strike, and he did it, and Bronny threw his hands up again, and I was like, "Is Yachty in the other batter's box?" And I squared him up again, and it was yeah, and I was like, "This is oh my goodness." So I will say, back then that was different. That was before everybody was, it was their game, and they would tell you it was their game. Nowadays, you can't have that because there's just too much electronically and this and that, and then stuff like that. But so yes, there is times, especially back then, that there was a little bit of that.
Matt, was there a guy that you knew liked you that would give you calls, or like, come on, you're a personable guy. There were guys that probably you knew would give you the benefit, right?
I tried that. Like, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do the buddy up deal. And I think I'm going to get some, like, I think they'll hook me up on some close pitches. And every time I felt like I was in a good spot with a guy, he'd just stick one up your butt. And you'd be like, bro, I'm not going to be nice to you anymore if this is the kind of treatment I'm going to get. No, I don't think that. I think they're very much, like Lance said, they kind of all had tendencies. Like they all kind of, they just kind of call a zone. And late in my career, you would get a printout of like, hey, this is the strike zone this guy calls. Like, he doesn't call the low pitch, he calls the high pitch. And I was like, let's just try to call the plate. Why am I getting a scouting report on an umpire? So right. I don't know. I never really paid off to.
Think I ever got any calls. I mean, that's probably not true, but I didn't feel like it.
That's great. Kyle, so now do you use, as you prepare for your next start, do you know that, all right, this is the scouting report on the umpire? Because, look, there's odds and stuff you can bet on that are based on who's umpiring a game.
Kyle doesn't bet. He's the active player.
I didn't say he bets. I'm just saying, does he use a scouting report?
I was just putting that out there. I was just making sure the world knows Kyle doesn't bet. Kyle likes his money. He doesn't like to give it away.
I mean, I like my reputation, my career too.
Alligator arms at dinner.
Yeah, hey, easy. No, I do not get the scatter report for the umpire, but I know the catchers do know, and the hitters do know for sure. I will remember, it was back in my time in Minnesota, Jason Castro, when pitch framing became, a stat that they would look at and really kind of, if the numbers pop. He would tell me when he's like, hey, on these sinkers down the way to the righty, I'm going to set up a little bit farther outside, because if my body moves toward the plate when I catch it, he's going to give me more strikes. If my body has to shift away from it, it can be on the plate and he's not going to call it. So, I think there was always games inside the game. But I mean, some of that's nuance and some of it's good and some of it's like outdated. Let's make this a game that, is even on both sides. But I don't know that I've necessarily benefited from being nice to an umpire. I try to be nice, but I don't think it's really fair if the umpire gives the pitcher a lot of grit calls off the plate at this point. Maybe it just helps him not miss calls in the zone. So if that's the case, I think
We all agree. I think we want consistency. Before we move on to the next thing, Matt, I want to welcome our new sponsor.
Oh,
We have a new sponsor. It's a local company that's been serving St. Louis for over 75 years, Kovac Mechanical. Kovac Mechanical, AC on the fritz, you call Kovac Mechanical. Furnace goes bad, you call Kovac Mechanical. I know these guys, great service, latest technology. Check them out online at KovacMechanical.com. That's KOVAC mechanical.com. How about that, Matt Holliday? We're
Now you know
starting
who
to
to call.
generate revenue.
Now you know who to call, Kyle.
Kovac Mechanical.
How did you know we were having issues?
Is that true? Is that true? You have that?
So we did just have an issue with HVAC not very long ago. Right now, I'm looking for somebody who can keep our washer from sounding like a garbage disposal when the spin cycle starts. So if that can be the next sponsor company, that would be great because we get a nice growl whenever our washer starts the spin cycle.
I'm sure
Once you
Kovac
clean out
can
all your
fix
pocket
that.
change.
Right?
Look, the guys at Kovac, very smart. I'll bet they can. So I will check. They don't necessarily repair washers, but they have technology, so maybe they can. And we're also giving them more mentions, so maybe they'll pay us more money. All right, next topic, and Kyle, you split whenever you want to split. But I wanted to talk about stats. You brought up stats as we wrapped up the last part of the program. I want to know, because there's always more stats. The analytics go deeper. There's enough stats that supposedly can fill in the blanks on anyone's performance. I want to know what you think are the least important stats or your least favorite stats in terms of assessing performance. And I'm going to start with Matt Holliday because he looks the biggest. Go, Matt.
So you want to know what stat I think is important to look at?
Least important. I want you to like this. This is a stat that gets thrown out that I don't think has a lot of weight, or take it wherever you want to go.
I think the fielding stats these days can be cheated and or like off. I don't when I look at the all the positions and how they like award points towards whatever the fielding metric is. I think that one is probably the one that's got the longest way to go before they can actually depict who's a great defender and who's not. So I would say that's the one that I've noticed is still a work in progress. But again, a lot of those stats that they talk about, the ex-WOBA and all of these, things that I'm not smart enough to understand. Like I don't know, maybe somebody's using those, but I think the one that we tend to leave out is the heart and the brain. When you try to break this game into like too much of stats and people's worth and that we forget who they are as a human being. I think that's something that's, sometimes we have so many stats and we have so much data that we're evaluating players based on like a spreadsheet as opposed to like watching them play and what they bring to a game and how they impact a game in ways that maybe you can't quantify. And so that's the thing with stats with me is I think it's great. Like that is awesome. We have tons of it and some of it's very usable. And to me, some of it's as a player can bog you down is too much, and trying to find the balance of sort of the old school, like compete toughness, grind it out, and also being able to use some of the new stats that actually are helpful. And so I think that's been the real challenge, at least in my eyes, of how to bridge that gap.
I think stats are a piece to a puzzle. There's not one stat that's all telling. But I'm going to ask the pitchers now, because there's a lot of people, and I think they're wrong. Wins mean nothing. A win is an empty stat. I disagree with that. You have a pitcher who knows how to win, who knows how to space out his stuff, who knows how to get by on days when maybe he doesn't have his best stuff. I think it's an important stat. What about you, Lance? You can rip some other stat or you could defend wins. Do what you want, Lance.
A lot of those other stats, they make them up to either they're going to figure out how to devalue you. It was a lot of the things that have been brought up. So, and in my opinion, and I think Kyle and Matt can both attest to this. Well, you had guys on your team that like knew how to win. They knew how to get deep into games. They knew how to do things that they needed to. And when you have those guys on the mound, offenses, they're like, oh, they got great run support. Offenses be like, oh man, we can just chip away. We don't have to score a bunch. They don't have to put pressure on themselves. It's a weird thing. And then you have guys that have great stuff. They have great numbers. Their strikeout numbers are great, this and that. And next thing you know, they're always losing games. It's like you can't be an ace if you're not a winner. In my opinion, everybody's out here to win games, and they're trying to have the best win percentage they can. And by doing that, you need to have starters that go 6+ innings and get wins. Because if you do that, you're going to have a great team. So I would say that that's probably the one that they're like, oh, it doesn't matter, but it does. If you outlast the other guy, your bullpen stays fresh. Next thing you know, you're going to win games. And that actually matters because you're out there doing it. You're not just throwing fives. Wins, loss don't matter. If you throw 5 innings and leave every time, yeah, they don't matter. But if you throw 6, 7 innings and you're outlasting the other guy, they do matter. And then they also save your bullpen.
What about you, Kyle?
I think stats, obviously have their place in the game. I think the stats that are most important are probably the stats that the fans really care about. I think like if the fans want to see certain numbers, I think show it to them and let them dive into it. Let them enjoy that side of the game. For me, I normally go back to a saying that my high school baseball coach said, and he said, baseball is a game of when. When do you get your hit? When do you make your pitch? When do you take an extra 90 feet? So those are probably some of the stats that I enjoy looking at the most is how do I perform with runners in scoring position, 2 outs when the inning is on the line, right? The game might not be on the line, but maybe the inning is on the line right here. Can I get the 3rd out? If I give up a leadoff hit and I get a double play, the hits per 9 inning might be high, but you know what? When I need to make a pitch, am I making that pitch? There's not necessarily a stat category other than, average with runners in scoring position and stuff like that. But, I think it matters. Like when you're looking at a hitter, when do they hit the slider? Like, do they hit the slider 0-0 and then they can't hit it with 2 strikes? Well, they might have a 350 batting average against sliders, but they do it all on the first couple pitches they at bat. If they can't hit it with 2 strikes, then great for me. So, I think it's all about how you look at it and making them accessible and giving fans a chance to look into it. I think lets them, kind of dive into maybe something that they'd be interested in. And then you have people like, that are old school fans that don't want to see the box on TV, don't want to see the stats. Like, let me just watch the game. And that's fine too.
Matt, back when you played and you were preparing for a certain pitcher, maybe you faced him a bunch of times, maybe you hadn't, you get a packet full of information, you get video to look at. When you were preparing, what was the most important thing for you to prepare to face the starter you were going to face that night? What was the thing that you went to the most to try to prep?
I would always just watch their 2 most recent starts against right-handed hitters. And, I think that knowing what their velocity is, knowing what they like to, their go-to secondary pitch is, if there's a side of the plate that they want to, they really want to camp out on and they don't really like throwing it to the other side of the plate. But I did all of my research for the starter specifically on my own on video. We'd had hitters meetings and gave stats and percentages, but most of the stuff for me was I wanted to watch. And if I had faced them before, obviously I was very, very comfortable in what their pitch shapes look like and could sort of see it in my brain already. So didn't need I don't need stats. I know what this looks like, where this pitch has to start for it to be a strike. And I think there was times where you could get overwhelmed with too much information. And I was a hitter where I had to keep it very simple. I'm going to look, my timing is going to be the fastball middle, and then I will adjust if he throws an off-speed pitch and it's hangs or it stays up. I feel like I can still hit it. I think that's just how I operated best. And I know some of the kids now and some of the guys now are more used to more information, and they will sit on things or look for things or do things now that's a little bit different. But for me, that was my best approach, was to do my own visual research on what the guy was doing, particularly against a middle of the order right-hand hitter. I would watch those guys and recently, and then sort of take my game plan from there. But super simple. Try to keep it as simple as possible. I don't want to be thinking about too many things when I'm in the box. I think your brain has room for one or two thoughts, a positive, affirming thought that is aggressive. I think was the most beneficial for me.
Lance, you had a.
I'm gonna split here, all right? But before I do, I'm gonna give you guys a view of one of my favorite parks. You guys have seen it, but for everybody that's watching, this is Target Field right here. All right.
Wow. Beautiful.
Got the cord.
Yeah.
Got the cord.
Lance, I know you love this place, especially in April and May. Okay, it's a beautiful place to pitch in April and May, so I know you love it here.
My worst stretch in my career was the Twin. Thanks for bringing it up.
Kyle, thank you for making time for us.
All right. Hey, you guys enjoy the rest of the talk.
Tell Jackson hi.
I will.
Dad said hi. Say Dad said hi.
Dad said hi. I'll let him know. See ya.
Thank you. Nice, Kyle Gibson coming on. So Lance, you don't like that ballpark at all?
No, beautiful ballpark, to be honest with you. I would say Minnesota, my stretch there was one of the greatest times as a teammate and stuff like that. Obviously that was the first time I got to play with Kyle and stuff like that. But I think I signed in spring training March 15th and I was on the opening day roster, and all of April was not good. We got snowed out for a week one time. So it was a tough time because I was just trying to get up to speed and it wasn't working. And then I had a decent second half when I went to New Minnesota is one of those places I wish I could go back and just pitch well for the fans.
What year was that?
That was my first year. So I was 18.
I totally forgot you even played in Minnesota. I can't even picture you there.
Yeah, signed March 15th. Started game 4 of the season. It didn't go well. April, I think I had a 9. I was getting better, and then I got traded. And then I had a decent run with New York down the stretch.
Matt, what was your least favorite ballpark to play in when you were playing?
Well, I think when you talk about the historically bad ballparks, I think, Oakland is not a great place to play, or it wasn't. Tampa Bay Dome feels kind of dim, kind of dark, feels kind of funny because you go from a magnificent day in Tampa where, you drive over the bridge and the water, and then you go into kind of a dim living room feeling.
Yeah.
But those two, everybody knows those are kind of the ballparks they're looking to replace. There were certain places where you just don't hit well, where you felt like the mound was 8 feet away and the pitcher was standing right next to you, and you just feel like you don't hit well there. I had some moments in San Diego where I just didn't hit well, and so that creeps into whether you like some place or not. So there's places that are not great ballparks, but you love to go in there because you hit really well there. Like the old Marlins Park, I loved it. It was a terrible place probably for fans to watch a baseball game, but I liked hitting there. I hit really well there, saw the ball really well, so I couldn't wait to get out there. So it's probably, I think Lance would agree, it's based on your performance, probably how you feel about most parks.
Yeah, which is your least favorite, Lance?
If you're looking at performance, I think my highest ERA is in Houston, which, that happens there, especially during those times. But I'm one of my favorite places that was to pitch, and I had great outings, was Seattle. I love pitching in Seattle. It was a little cooler too. This big body liked a little cooler temperature too. And Milwaukee, same, right? They closed the roof, just let me heave it, and it was a little chilly, and I wasn't sweating too much. So I seem to feel like I pitched well in those places. I might not have, I don't know, but I was always comfortable and throwing in those ballparks.
I didn't get to ask you in terms of how you used to prepare for a start. I would venture to guess too, you're more eye test guy, less numbers because you're old school. What was them like? What? Give me one or two things that you leaned on to get ready for a start.
Well, so I think the beauty of the simple, like I could just being simple, as Matt said, is I had 3 fastballs. So my thought process when I was watching hitters, when you're watching film, is all right. Where can of these 3 fastballs? Where can I get ahead in the count? Where can I get back in the count if I'm behind? And where can I finish them off with these 3? And then where can I? What are their like hot and cold zones, like bat path wise? So you read their bat path, their swings, and then and then I would visualize that with seeing the hot and cold zones. And then, okay, this is his hot zone, but I have to, he'll cover this if you don't make him honor this side of the plate. So that's where, when I always said, oh, you got to tease him there. Like, hey, this guy's his hot zone, but if you tease him in there and you get him leaning a little bit and then run him off in a little bit, and then you can go back out there, or sometimes double up in there just to mess with their mind. So I would do a little bit of everything. And the older I got, with the more that you would get, there was more stuff that was handed out and stuff like that. I learned how to use the stuff that I already knew in my brain. And then like, okay, that's what that means. That's what, and I'd be able to piece it to numbers. And then it was able to be like, okay, here's, this guy in this, in an OO count with runners on, he's going to be more aggressive. His swing percentage goes up, and he's more on heater. So maybe that's when I use breaking ball to start off a count, or with no one on, he's less aggressive. So here's where I can get away with a OO heater in the zone and not get hurt. So like those are the things. Like you had the baseball IQ, and then you figured out how to use the numbers that everybody was spewing out at the end, was what I was kind of doing. And I got myself in trouble at times with it too, trying to pitch to it. And I was like, man, do what you're good at and stop trying to chase things that just because everybody wants you to do them doesn't mean they are going to work for you specifically, because everybody's different.
No, I think wisdom comes with age. I know it has in my
grace. So grace.
And grace. Thank you, Matt. So I'm going to come up with another topic here. I want to know this, so you could say it's dumb. I want to start with you, Matt. And I didn't give you the topics ahead of time. Give me the former teammate of yours that you think is most underrated. A guy you played with that maybe wasn't a star, that you think was great, that maybe doesn't get enough love. And if that's an awful question, you can kill me for it.
Well, it is an awful question, but that's to be expected.
Let's redefine this question a little bit, because it's a tough one. Because most of the time, your underrated players are probably your best teammates and like the glue guys, because that matters in a clubhouse and a winning team.
Then that's your guy. Your guy.
I would say.
But I want some.
What do you think, Matt? Do you like that?
Yeah, I think that there's guys like Brad Hopp that I played with that had a couple really, really good seasons that I think people forget about, and Garrett Atkins, and I think part of that is that they had their sweet spot was not as long, and maybe people don't remember them for those couple of really good years. And then you have guys that were really important, like Lance is talking about, like Skip and Nick Punto, and some of these guys that they were really good at their job, and I think they were very important behind the scenes in the clubhouse to support a winning team. So that's kind of like the two for me. Like the guys that get sort of aren't remembered as good as they should be are guys that play behind the scenes roles and did their role, which is really hard, really well. And then you have guys like that had a shorter window of excellence, but they didn't do it for 5 or 6 years. They did it for 1 or 2, but those 1 or 2 were all-star caliber, and people maybe forgot that they had those seasons. So those are the guys that kind of pop in my head off the top of my head. If Lance wants to go, I can maybe think about it, since you did not send out any show prep.
It's better this way. This is because we're keeping it real, as the kids say.
Yeah, as that's what the kids say.
That's what the kids say. Keeping it real. I've got two that popped in my head, and I think they kind of go along with both aspects of were really good. They played well on the field and kind of were forgotten about, and then they were great to clubhouse. And that was Kyle Loesch and Jake Westbrook. Like those guys they had really great long careers. Like Westy won 100 games, and I don't think he's someone that people talk about as being like a really good big leaguer, but he was very underappreciated, went deep into games, just firing sinkers at people. And then you're looking at clubhouse wise, was one of the best. As for someone to get Chris Carpenter to smile on a daily basis, like that just tells you what of a what of a dude he was. So, for me, having those two guys with Carpenter, with Waino early on in my career gave me a really good like sense of, or a really good ability to kind of morph me into bulldog on the mound, warrior on the mound, but also really taught me to take care of people and have fun playing the game at the same time.
I just saw Westbrook in the stands when we were on the road recently, and I was like, "Why don't
Atlanta?
Yeah, why don't you come down to see the guys?" He's like, "They won't let me in." He was a really good pitcher, and I remember how tight that whole starting rotation was. But if he made Chris Carpenter smile, that's doing something. He should be on the list just for that.
That's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah,
especially back then. He's a lot more smiley today.
Yeah, because he's not as. Sorry, have you added anyone else to your list, Matt? Because you said while Lance was answering, you might come up with another one.
Jake Westbrook and Kyle Loesch were two that I was thinking about.
I'm just kidding. All right, you're stealing Lance's stuff. All right, I'm going to move on. I'm going to morph off this because this is another one. Give me a teammate of yours that you think, out of all the guys you played with, so you're probably going to tick off someone, of all the guys you've played with, and I'll start with Matt. So I'm gonna make it a long question so that you can think about it on the fly.
Putting you on the spot today, Matt.
But you got to give me the question
today.
What? Yeah, we're gonna get to it here. Of all the guys, and then I'm gonna restate it, that you played with that would make the best manager. Maybe like Skip already is managed, so take him off the list. Of all the guys you've played with who haven't managed in the big leagues, who would be the best big league manager? And I've spread this question out for about 34 seconds, so you should be able to come up with a name, Matt.
Okay.
Are we adjusting our camera to buy time?
No, I'm adjusting it because this stupid thing you got me using like keeps going in and out where I lose the sound. So I have to plug my headphones back in and then unplug them. But anyways, we can talk about that later. But I'd say a guy that has not I played with him in Oakland was Kurt Suzuki. As you guys know, a lot of catchers go on to be managers because they are interacting with the managers a lot, and they're thinking the whole game, they're watching the whole field. He's a guy, I don't know if he'd ever want to be a manager, but he has a lot of the personality traits. He's very smart. I think he would be a great manager. The obvious choice of, like Skip's already been a manager, and Yachty obviously is incredibly bright and another catcher that, if he wants to do it, I think would be incredibly successful. I mean, Albert is already doing it with the Dominican Winter League, and, they won the championship right out of the gate. So I think most of the guys that have 10 or 15 years in the major leagues could be a good manager if they wanted to be. The problem is most of them have made enough money that they don't need the job, and how many hours that it takes up and how much you have to really, be all in to be a major league manager. So those are the ones that jump off for me.
I'm gonna go right along with it. I think Kurt had a great career, so I don't think he would want to deal with it either.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's for me, there's two guys that pop in my mind, and they were catchers that grinded their butts off to have long careers, and that's Bobby Wilson and Jeff Mathis. Those guys were their ability to make sure that I didn't lose my shit every time I pitched tells me what you need to know about them as catchers and being able to control what's going on. They always saw the game in the right way. And then I got a third one, Rob Johnson. You remember him, Matt?
Yeah.
I was sitting next to him on the bench one time when I was young, and he started talking about swing planes and paths and stuff like that. He's like, "Hey, this guy can't cover this pitch and this pitch." And I was like, "Timeout, what are you talking about?" And I was able to learn that from him over that little bit of time we had together, which was huge to me because I was able to learn how to this guy can't cover the high fastball, the riding fastball, or the sinking or the cutting. I was able to, and I was like, oh, that makes sense to me. Then I can be able to use my arsenal against swing paths too. So those three, and they're all backup catchers that had to wear it their whole career.
Is there something to that, Matt, that like you had an opportunity, but if you're a guy who is sitting on a pile of money, I'm not talking about you, but generally speaking, a superstar, a guy who made a lot of money, to go and start as a coach, a hitting coach, assistant hitting coach, whatever it is, the role has changed over the years. I mean, the coaching staff, they're in 9 a.m., they're going through tape. There's a lot more responsibility on them. And if you have enough money where you can do whatever you want to do, that's a pretty big commitment. So do you think that sort of eliminates guys that have generational wealth, we'll call it?
I mean, I certainly think it's a factor now more than it's ever been. There's more guys that have made enough money that they don't have to work and they don't need a job. So I certainly think that is trending probably more towards that. The more the game has gotten to where there's more guys that have made generational wealth to where they don't have to work and they can kind of pick and choose whatever they want, and they'd rather be at home with their family and spend time with their kids, and that money's not an issue, and they can kind of do things here, do things there, still stay involved. But they don't need the grind of 162. And like you said, the early arrivals, and then the late nights. I mean, I think for me, particularly with the kids, I could see, getting more involved when my kids are older and out of the house, to where you and your wife could fly around to big league cities and have nice dinners, and your kids have already established that they're out living their own lives, and I think that's more probably doable for a lot of guys than missing things with the kids when they don't have to, when they don't need the money of managing and coaching. So I think it's probably trending that way, just because of, like I said, there's more money that have played, guys that have made more money the further we get along. So that'd be my opinion on it.
All right, Lance, you have kids. Certainly you have knowledge that could help other pitchers, but the commitment is a pretty huge one.
Yeah, I mean, and if I was doing it to make money, I would have just kept playing and made way more and worked way less than the coaches do. So that's the truth of the matter. And you're looking at nowadays as a manager and stuff like that, the game's changed so much where there's so many people that put their input that are in an office above you that you don't, that guys that played a long time and don't have to deal with that headache aren't going to deal with it, to be honest with you. So I think it's a little bit of everything. You got enough money where you don't have to do it. You don't have to deal with you don't have to be away from home. Or you gotta deal with it because this is you're a lifer almost, right, Matt? Like, that the guys that were going to be lifers and that's what they were going to do and that's what they had to do to make a living forever. And then there's guys that make enough money where they can do what they want to do. Some of them go coach, some of them don't, and that's just the moral of it. And when you make enough money, you don't really want to be told by somebody who's never played the game what lineup to put out there or what pitching change you should have made or this or that when they don't have a feel for what's going on in the dugout or clubhouse because they're not there every day. So I think it's a little bit of everything.
Matt, would you look, you deal with a hitting coach who probably wasn't as good a hitter as you were in your time, Lance, same as a pitch. I'm just curious.
He had Big Mac. He had Big Mac. What are you talking about?
Well, that's one coach. But along the way, you're dealing with, does that ever cross your mind? I mean, look, you don't have to be a great broadcaster, player to be a great teacher, right? Or whatever it is. But does that ever creep in your mind, or has it in your career where you're getting taught how to hit by a 240 hitter and you're like, okay, fine?
No, I think it's I think as hitters and as baseball players, if you have something that you think might help me and you're willing to offer it out, I'm willing to listen. Now, it may not be something that I agree with or use or even am willing to try, but I have respect. And I grew up, my dad was a coach, my brother's a coach. Like, I have a respect for coaches and the time that they're putting in. And if they are if they're taking time to try to want to help me, then I'm willing to listen. It doesn't matter what their resume says. Now, I think there's, certainly when you can speak from a place of having had your cleats in the box and you can relate to what they're going through mentally, that certainly adds an aspect that gives a hitter maybe a little bit more comfort in what you're saying, because you have been in there and you have struggled like they've struggled, and you have figured it out, and you've been, you've been in where they've been. That I certainly think offers, some relatability, that somebody that is that has never done that. But that doesn't mean that they don't have anything that could be helpful. And I was always willing to listen to anybody that thought that they could help me. Sometimes you agree with it, and sometimes you don't. But I certainly had respect for anybody that was putting in the time to try to help others.
Lance, were you willing to listen?
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at my last pitching coach was Dusty Blake, who, never was a major leaguer or anything like that, and we had a great relationship, and I learned a lot from him, and I think he learned a lot from me. So I think that's the moral of the story: is you can always learn something from somebody. It might not work for you, but it might be something that you learn, and then you might be able to pass that on to a guy that it works for them. Baseball's a weird game. Everybody's got different ways, different mindsets, different, like, the process is different for each guy, is what I'm saying. So terminologies, thought processes, this, everybody's different. So take everything you can. Something might click, or it might be something that you might help a teammate with. So that was always the thing. You learn something every day. You can learn it. Oh, this works for me, or this doesn't. So that was my motto.
Dusty Blake, I think, is an awesome guy. I think he said I was disingenuous when I told him it was always a pleasure to interview him, because he's a smart guy. But he's really good. Maybe I should get a coach on how to ask better questions.
He
But I've
thinks you're
been
a
winging
dick,
it.
probably. That's probably the problem.
That's hurtful. That's hurtful. But it's also a good place to wrap it up. Lance, you were great. Matt, you were great. Kyle Gibson was great. I was mediocre, but hopefully I'll get better
You
next
made a
time.
career on it, baby.
Yeah. Well, you set the bar here, not high.
right.
Here, you can reach it. That's going to do it for this edition of Serving It Up. We'll see you next time. Hopefully, it won't suck.